In lesson 4, we're going to answer the question, how do I identify the unit rate and use it in rate situations? If you take a look at workbook page 13, you see this problem. Pedro and Pilar collect snails. Each day they add 4 snails to their tank. Every day they add 4 snails to their tank. Hopefully you recognize that right away as a rate situation. 4 snails added to their tank every day. How many snails do they have after 5 days? Okay, well, one way you may want to do this may involve making a rate table. Here we have our unit column, which in this case is the days, and then we have our product column, which would be our snails. That means we can figure out how many snails there are after, a specific number of days. So let's see. If we're doing 4 snails per day, that means 4 snails on the first day. Now add another 4, and now we're up to 8. Okay, then we add another 4, and we're up to 12. We can add another 4, and now we're up to 16. And if we add another 4, that means on the 5th day, we will actually have 20 snails. So how many snails will they have after 5 days? They will have 20 snails. Now, you're probably wondering what this section is for. We haven't seen this before, where we have lines to the left side. If you notice, on the right side, we wrote, what we added every time, right? The $4, I almost said $4, the 4 snails that were, added to the tank every single day. Well, on the left side, we're going to show the multiplication that you can use to also determine your answer. If you remember from lesson 3, we saw some problems where we could have used multiplication to figure out, in that case, how many dollars Noreen had saved in her duck bank. Here we can use multiplication to figure out how many snails Pedro and Pilar will have in their tank after a certain number of days. And it's very simple to use multiplication. All you want to do is take your unit and times it by the unit rate, which was $4 every single day. A unit rate is basically another word for the amount for 1, and you're going to see that later on in this page. So here, if I have the second day and 4 snails per day, that's 2 times 4. Here's my third day, still timesing it by 4 because it's 4 snails per day, and there's my 12. Fourth day, 4 snails per day, now we're at 16. Fifth day, 4 snails per day, now we're up to 20. So this just shows you all the multiplication that you could do. If you look at number 3, where in the rate table is the answer to problem 1, and why is it there? Well, hopefully you recognize that the answer, let's see, I'm going to change the color here. The answer here was in this row on the 5th day. Why do you think it was there? Well, remember, we were being asked how many snails would they have after 5 days. It's in the row of 5 days because we see the increase of 4 snails per day after collecting for 5 days. So if we've been collecting snails for 5 days, we can see that in the 5th row. Now, here's the bottom of page 13. This is where you see more about the multiplication that I had mentioned. Remember, a rate problem, you can use multiplication for it. It can be thought of as equal groups multiplication. That means you're talking about an equal group of something. In this situation, we're talking about the number of days, right? It doesn't matter, what day it is. Pedro and Pilar are putting 4 snails in. Whether it's the 4th day, whether it's the 100th day, they're putting 4 snails in every single day. It does not matter which day. So that actually shows you the number of equal groups. In this case, the number of days. We also might want to call it the unit. The units are always going to be the ones that get multiplied, and they're going to be multiplied with the unit rate. The unit rate is the amount in one group. Remember, there were 4 snails every one day. In Noreen's case, we had it was $3 per day that she deposited in her duck bank. That's a unit rate, $3 for one day. What if I gave you a couple other situations? What if I said, I don't know, there were 5 apples per bag? Well, that's a unit rate because we're basically saying that there's 5 apples in one bag. Maybe I'll talk about money. Maybe it costs, let's see, maybe it was $2 for every pair of socks. So that's a unit rate because we're saying every one single pair of socks, it's going to cost you $2 for it. And then you can use this idea to do some multiplication. You want to multiply your units, the number of equal groups, by the unit rate. So let's say we're going to figure out how many snails Pedro and Pilar will have on the, let's say the 10th day. Okay, well, number of days is 10, 4 snails per day. Now that means we'd have 40 snails by the 10th day. Let's go back to Noreen. Noreen was saving $3 per day. So let's say, okay, how much would she have after the 20th day? So we've got 20 days, $3 per day. That means we're up to $60 by the 3rd day. I'm sorry, by the 20th day. What if we go back to that pair of socks? We said every pair of socks was, what do we say, $2, right? So what if I want to buy 5 pairs of socks? And each one costs $2. That means I'd be spending $10 on 5 pairs of socks. So the units always get multiplied by the unit rate. And that will give you your product, which is, the total for whatever your situation is. Now, if you have the same rate, and it's repeated over and over again, you have a constant rate. We mentioned that before. Here, our constant rate was 4 snails every day. And there's a couple special words that we use to show this constant rate, and those special words are right here. Every, each, and per. They all tell you that it's always staying the same, that rate is staying constant. The rate is 4 snails every day, 4 snails each day, 4 snails per day. That rate is staying constant. Now, if you look at workbook page 14, you are going to take a look at a couple different situations and decide first, is there a constant rate? Is there something that is staying the same? It's never changing. And once you have that constant rate, you have to figure out what is the rate. We're going to write it down, and then we're going to complete the table. Honestly, I think the hardest part is probably going to be figuring out what the unit would be in the product, putting the labels in. So we're going to do 4 and 5 together, and then you can do the rest on your own. If you look at number 4, in the zoo, 7 kangaroos live in each kangaroo house. 7 kangaroos live in each kangaroo house. That sounds constant to me. That tells me that no matter what house, there's going to be 7 kangaroos living there. So I would say yes. And I could write that using my rate language, which is 7 kangaroos per house. 7 kangaroos in each house. Now when we go to make our table, first thing we need to do is we need to figure out what is the unit here. In this case, the unit is usually the one that follows the word per, or follows the word each, or follows the word every. In this case, our unit is the house. This is where we're going to have the equal groups, right? It doesn't matter whether it's the 7th house or the 100th house. We're going to have 7 kangaroos in every single house. So that's our unit. That means our product would be the number of kangaroos. So let's see, if we're talking about one house, one unit, well, that's 7 kangaroos. If we're talking about 2 houses, now we're up to 14 kangaroos. That's an increase of 7 kangaroos, obviously. You could also use multiplication. You're talking about the 2nd house, 7 kangaroos per house, that's 2 times 7. Let's see, the 3rd house, okay. Now we're up to 21 kangaroos. Again, we're increasing it by 7. We're adding 7 more kangaroos in because we've got another house. You could also write that using multiplication, 3 times 7. Talking about the 3rd house, 7 kangaroos in each, 3 times 7 is 21. Alright, let's look at number 5. In the last 3 weeks, Ben saw 3 films, then 4 films, and then 3 films. Is there a constant rate? Do you see an each or an every or a per? Those are probably going to be your clues. In this case, I'd say no. There is no constant rate. He's seeing a different number of films each week. It's not constant. It's not staying the same. So in this case, because the answer is no, I'm not going to fill anything else in. I don't really need to. I'm only going to fill it in when I have a constant rate. I want you to try the rest on that page. And here are our takeaways. So first, a unit rate. That is the value that is associated with 1 unit. How much for 1? Constant rate. That's a rate that's repeated. Remember, every, each, and per, those are words that help you to pick out your constant rate. And you can use the unit rate and equal groups multiplication to solve a rate problem, which, if you remember, is the unit times the unit rate. And finding the unit rate means finding how much for 1 unit. How many dollars per day? How many pounds, per bag? You need to know how much for 1.